Snow fell in slow, deliberate sheets, as though the sky itself had grown tired and wished only to fold the earth beneath a white quilt. Each flake clung to Isla's lashes until she blinked them away, her breath fogging before her face like fragile smoke. She was only 18, though the way she dragged her steps across the frozen trail gave her the air of someone much older, someone already carrying more winters than her body should have known. Her boots, torn at the seams, soaked through with icy slush, offered little protection. She pulled her shawl tighter, though the cloth was as thin as a ghost's breath. Her lips moved without sound at first, until she whispered aloud, the words escaping her in a tremor. "Don't touch me," she said, voice fragile against the wind. Then softer, as if to the snow itself. "I'm broken." The forest around her hushed as though it listened. Pines leaned under the weight of white, their branches groaning but never snapping. The air smelled sharp, like iron and smoke carried from far-off chimneys she would never reach. Hunger ached in her belly. The shame of it pressed harder still, like a hand at the back of her neck. Her knees buckled, and she sank into the drift, the snow swallowing her legs. She thought perhaps this would be the end. Quiet, clean, no one left to laugh at her ruin. But then, from the shadow of the trees, something moved. A man stepped into the storm, shirtless though the wind cut like knives. His chest was broad, skin bronze despite the frost clinging to his shoulders, his hair long and white, like snow grown into flesh. He was enormous, towering over her with a presence that seemed carved from mountain stone. Yet when his eyes met hers, they held no cruelty, only an old, still patience. She flinched as he neared, covering herself as though even the air's brush were too much to bear. He stopped, not reaching, not touching. For a long moment he simply stood, steam rising from his body, as if warmth itself bowed before him. His silence was heavier than words, but not oppressive, waiting perhaps. "I can walk," she stammered, though her legs betrayed her, trembling deep in the snow. He crouched slowly, the snow crunching beneath him, until his great frame lowered to her level. His voice, when it came, was deep and unhurried, like water flowing through stone. "I will not touch you, girl. But will you hear me?" Her throat tightened. She nodded, wary. "I am Chaska," he said. "My son is Tahu. He is strong, young, and he is alone. I ask, can you marry him?" The words struck like the crack of a branch in still woods. She blinked, stunned. Of all the things she might have feared, of all the humiliations she expected from men, this was something else entirely. She almost laughed from the strangeness, but the sound tangled in her throat. I cannot," she whispered. "Don't you see? I am ruined. No man wants what I am." Chaska studied her with eyes dark as the storm. He did not argue. He did not press. He only inclined his head, a gesture of respect that made her shame burn hotter. "You think you are broken," he said at last. "But broken things can still carry fire." She turned her face away, hot tears freezing on her lashes. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he said. His breath drifted in clouds that seemed too steady for the cold. "The snow would take you tonight. My son has need of a wife, and you have need of life. This is all." The simplicity of it made her chest ache. No bargaining, no hunger in his gaze, no claim over her body. Only the strange offering of a future she could not imagine. She forced herself to her feet, legs trembling. "I'll walk," she said again, as though stubbornness could be armor. Chaska rose as well, a mountain lifting into the storm. He did not extend his hand, but his gaze followed her, ensuring she did not fall. Together they began to move, her steps faltering, his stride steady and sure. The snow deepened as they went, the storm closing its fist around the trail. Isla's breath came ragged, and once, when her ankle twisted, she stumbled hard. Instinct screamed that he would catch her, but he did not. He let her fight back to her feet alone. Only when she swayed near collapse did his voice come again, low and even. "My son waits in town," he said. "You will see him. Then you may choose." She shook her head, choking on shame. "I've already told you, I cannot belong to anyone." "You belong to the earth," Chaska said, his tone neither soft nor harsh, simply true. The earth does not cast out its children. The words wrapped around her, unsettling as they were comforting. She hated how they reached past her defenses, stirring something she had tried to bury. They walked until her legs grew too weak again. Her body folded into the snow like a rag doll, her breath shallow, her vision narrowing. She thought of lying down and letting the white cover her for good. Then she heard him, Chaska's voice, steady in the storm. "Girl, if you close your eyes now, you will not open them again." She wanted to answer, but only a sob came. He crouched once more, his massive frame lowering without urgency. He did not lift her, though he could have done so with ease. Instead he waited, as though her will alone must decide. Through the blur of snow she saw his eyes, calm, old, enduring. Not pitying. Not demanding. Only waiting. Some ember in her chest flickered against the wind, small but defiant. She pressed her palms to the frozen ground and pushed herself upright, swaying. Chaska gave the faintest nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, as though she had passed some test unspoken. They continued through the storm, side by side, her body quaking but still moving. At last, beyond the trees, faint lantern light glowed from the town ahead. Smoke rose from chimneys, blurred by the falling snow. Isla's chest tightened at the sight, knowing whispers awaited her there, knives hidden in mouths. Yet she also felt the heavy presence of the man beside her, his silence like a shield. When they reached the edge of the settlement, Chaska paused. His breath rose steady in the cold. He turned his head toward her, not commanding but asking. "You will see him," he repeated. "Then decide." Her pulse beat hard in her throat. She wanted to run, to vanish back into the storm. But her legs held her fast, her breath rising in pale clouds. Through the swirl of snow, another figure waited near the trading post. A younger giant, broad-shouldered, dark-eyed, bare chest steaming against the cold. He stood like a sentinel, unmoving, his gaze fixed not on Chaska but on her. Isla's heart lurched. She could not yet name the feeling, but it burned hotter than the snow could smother. The wind howled, pressing them closer to the light, to choice, to whatever waited beyond the storm. Lanterns burned weak in the storm, their glow smudged against the heavy veil of snow. The town crouched under the white weight, cabins and shops huddled close, as though the cold were an enemy they feared might creep inside. Isla entered with Chaska at her side, her small form drawn tight in the ragged shawl. Her steps faltered, not from the snow alone, but from the eyes that lifted as she passed. Settlers paused at doorways, behind windows, their glances sharpened into whispers. A girl, soiled by shame, walking with a shirtless Apache giant. It was spectacle enough to feed gossip for weeks. Isla felt their stares burn hotter than any hearth. She pulled the shawl higher, wishing to vanish, but every footstep seemed to echo too loudly on the frozen ground. Near the trading post, another figure emerged through the snow. Broad, young, bare-chested despite the storm. Tahu, Chaska's son. His dark eyes were steady, unblinking as they rested on Isla. For a moment she thought the earth itself had summoned him from its core, all strength and silence. She trembled, not with fear exactly, but with the rawness of being seen. Chaska's voice came low, almost carried away by the wind. "This is Tahu." Isla looked once, then down again, shame flooding her cheeks. She braced for judgment in his gaze, the disgust she had come to expect. But none came. He neither reached for her nor turned away. He simply watched, still as a carved figure, while the snow clung to his dark hair and broad shoulders. The trading post door creaked, spilling lamplight. Elias Turner, the shopkeeper, squinted at the sight before him. His lips curled into a smirk, and he called over his shoulder. "Martha, you'll want to see this." A woman appeared, bundled in furs, her eyes sharp as flint. Martha Kane let out a short, cruel laugh. "Well, if it isn't little Isla Monroe. Thought you'd vanished with the last storm." Her gaze slid to Chaska, then to Tahu, lingering like a blade at Isla's throat. "And now you keep Apache company. Lord help us." The words pricked the air like nettles. Isla's chest tightened. She wanted to shout, to explain, but her voice froze in her throat. Chaska said nothing, his silence deep as the storm. Tahu did not flinch, his expression unreadable, though the muscles in his jaw tightened. Martha clucked her tongue, speaking loud enough for other townsfolk to hear. No wonder no man in town would have her. Broken girl, ruined early. Now she seeks comfort where no one else dares. Laughter rippled from the bystanders. Isla bit her lip hard, tasting blood, but kept her head bowed. Shame dripped down her spine like melting ice. Chaska finally stepped forward, his shadow looming in the lantern glow. He laid 2 coins on Elias Turner's counter, the sound firm, final. "Food," he said simply. Elias raised a brow. "For her." His smirk widened. "She's better fed by gossip." Chaska did not answer, only waited. Something in his stillness unnerved the man. Grumbling, Elias pushed forward a sack of flour and a wedge of dried meat. Chaska took them, but instead of handing them to Isla, he placed them on the counter's edge where she could claim them herself. She understood the gesture. Dignity offered, not taken. With trembling fingers, she reached for the food. The townsfolk muttered, but Isla felt a spark stir inside her chest, small yet alive. Behind her, she heard a shift of leather and wood. Tahu crouched, his broad hands deftly working at something. She turned just enough to see. He was repairing her boot, stitching the leather with a strip torn from his own belt. His face was calm, focused, as though the task mattered more than the eyes upon him. He said nothing, but when he finished, he set the boot back before her with quiet precision. Her throat ached. She wanted to protest, to tell him she did not deserve his effort. Instead, she slipped her foot inside, the warmth of his offering sealing around her toes. She whispered, barely audible, "Thank you." For the first time, Tahu's eyes met hers directly. He gave a single nod, no smile, no word, only acknowledgement that carried more weight than speech. The storm outside deepened, snowflakes swirling in through the crack of the door. Reverend Josiah stepped into the trading post then, his cloak dusted with white, his gray beard damp. His gaze fell on the unlikely gathering, Isla, the Apache elder, and his son. He sighed, the sound weary as old wood settling. "Isla," he said, voice rough but not unkind. "Child, what path are you walking?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her hands clutched the sack of flour, as though it were her last anchor. The Reverend's eyes moved to Chaska, then to Tahu, his brow furrowed. "You bring her among you. Do you know what the town will say? What it will cost her?" "She already knows the weight of shame," Chaska replied, his voice even. "She cannot be crushed by more." Martha's laughter cut through the air again. "She'll drag us all down with her filth." Josiah raised a hand to silence her, though his expression remained troubled. He looked at Isla with something close to pity. "If you tie yourself to them, child, you'll be cast out forever. There will be no place for you here." The words struck harder than the cold. Isla's heart thudded, her breath catching in her chest. She thought of the snow waiting outside, the silence of the storm where she had nearly let herself vanish. She thought of Tahu's quiet hands repairing her boot, of Chaska's refusal to take her burden from her, but letting her stand on her own. Her gaze lifted, drawn unwillingly toward Tahu once more. He stood steady, snow melting against the heat of his body, eyes fixed on her without judgment. He did not ask, did not demand. He simply waited, as though her choice alone mattered. For the first time in years, Isla felt the weight of a decision that belonged to her. Not pressed upon her, not stolen. Hers. Her lips parted, breath shivering in the cold lamplight. She whispered, barely louder than the storm, "I don't know where I belong." Josiah's shoulders sagged, sorrow in his eyes. "Then you must choose carefully, child." Outside, the wind howled, rattling the shutters as though the storm itself pressed against the walls. Inside, silence stretched taut between them all. The town's judgment heavy, Isla's shame raw, the Apaches unyielding in their calm. She clutched the flower tighter, heart racing, as her gaze flicked once more toward Tahu. And in his steady eyes, she glimpsed not desire, not pity, but something stranger. Something that frightened her more than rejection. Possibility. The storm roared louder, and with it the first flicker of a choice that might change everything. The storm chased them out of the town as if the whispers themselves had teeth. Snow pressed hard against Isla's back, needling her cheeks until she could no longer tell whether the wetness there was melted ice or tears. Chaska moved ahead, his strides long and steady, while Tahu walked at her side, silent as shadow. Their presence formed a corridor of strength around her, though she fought the feeling, fearing what it might mean to lean on anyone again. The trail wound through dark pines until a cabin came into view, its roof heavy with white, smoke curling faintly from a crooked chimney. The door groaned open under Chaska's hand, and the rush of warmth within struck Isla like a blow. Firelight danced across the wooden walls, painting the room in gold and ember red. She hesitated at the threshold, clutching her shawl tight. It had been so long since she had entered a place that felt like shelter instead of judgment. Chaska stepped aside, his great frame filling the doorway as he waited for her to choose. She drew in a sharp breath and crossed the threshold. The scent of burning pine filled her lungs, rich and sharp, and the sound of the fire cracked like small bones breaking. Her hands trembled as she pulled them free of her shawl. Inside, the space was sparse yet whole. A low table, blankets folded with care, the fire fed with steady attention. No luxury, yet nothing broken. It unsettled her, this absence of ruin. Chaska placed the sack of flour on the table and sat on the floor near the fire, his presence calm as stone. Tahu, silent, crouched opposite him. He gestured briefly toward a blanket, an invitation without words. Isla's knees bent before her mind could resist. She lowered herself near the fire, its warmth searing into her skin until the ache of cold began to ease. Her body sagged against the blanket, but her spirit braced, afraid that comfort was only the bait for pain. Tahu slid a wooden bowl toward her, filled with broth that smelled faintly of venison and herbs. He did not watch her take it, only returned his gaze to the fire. She stared at the bowl, then at him. His silence unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. At last she lifted it, sipping. Heat scalded her tongue, but she did not stop, drinking greedily until the bowl was empty. She set it down, ashamed of her hunger, ashamed of needing. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "You should have kept it." Tahu's dark eyes flickered to hers just once, calm and unyielding. Then he shook his head faintly, a single gesture that said what words did not. "You are alive, and that matters." Her throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, but the word caught on the knot of shame. Instead she pulled the blanket closer, curling in on herself as though bracing for blows that did not come. Hours passed in silence. The storm outside battered the roof, but within, only the fire spoke. Isla found herself watching its restless tongues of light, her heart rising and falling with each crack. She did not notice until too late that words had slipped from her lips. "They said I was no good." The sound startled her. She clamped her mouth shut, but the dam had cracked. Her fingers dug into the blanket. "They said I was spoiled. That no man would touch me without shame." She bit down hard, breath shaking. "And they were right. Don't you see? I'm nothing worth saving." Her voice fractured into the fire's roar. She pressed her palms to her face, wishing to bury the confession, to claw it back. The silence that followed was unbearable, her body tense, waiting for mockery, for disgust. Instead, Chaska spoke, his voice low as thunder rolling far away. "Snow breaks branches, but spring bends them back to the sky." She lowered her hands, eyes wet and furious. "You don't understand." His gaze held hers, deep and ancient. "I understand enough." Tahu had not moved, though she saw his knuckles tighten briefly on his knee. He looked at her then, his expression unreadable but his silence louder than words. He did not reach for her. He did not turn away. He simply stayed, and in that staying, something in her chest twisted. The fire warmed her skin, but shame left her shivering. She drew the blanket over her head, curling into herself, wishing for sleep to silence everything. Yet even behind closed eyes, she saw Tahu's face, unmoved, unwavering, as though he had already chosen patience as his weapon. Time folded. The fire dimmed, shadows stretching like dark fingers across the walls. Isla stirred, her body restless against dreams she could not hold. A sound jolted her upright, the heavy knock of a fist against the cabin door. Chaska's head lifted. Tahu rose in one swift motion, his frame towering, every muscle braced. The knock came again, harder, voices slithering through the storm outside. "Bring her out." It was Elias Turner's voice, sharp with malice. "She don't belong with you people. You've no right keeping her." Another voice, Martha Kane's, cut through. "She's our shame, not yours. Hand her back before you curse us all." Isla froze, blood rushing to her ears. Fear coiled tight in her stomach. The town had followed her here, their whispers turning into demands. The fire snapped, scattering sparks into the air. Tahu stood near the door, his broad shoulders shadowing the light, his silence thrumming with a tension she could feel in her bones. Chaska rose slowly, his calm unbroken, though his presence filled the cabin like rising tide. Isla clutched the blanket to her chest, breath shallow. She wanted to hide, to vanish into the floorboards, but the storm outside would not let her escape. The whispers of town had grown claws, and now they scratched at the door, demanding blood. The knock thundered again. Elias's voice snarled. "If she stays with you, she'll never set foot in town again. Decide now." Isla's heart hammered, her body taut with terror. She looked toward Chaska, then to Tahu, her breath breaking against the weight of their silence. And in that stillness, she realized the storm had followed her here, not of snow alone, but of judgment. The firelight shook against the walls, casting Tahu's shadow high, giant, immovable. Isla's lips parted, a single thought rising like a spark too bright to smother. If she stepped outside, she would be broken again. If she stayed, she might be remade. The door shuddered under another blow. And the decision pressed closer, waiting for her trembling voice. The door rattled again, fists pounding like war drums, each blow shaking the frame. Snow hissed through the cracks, drawn in by the storm, and with it came the voices of the town, sharp, insistent, cutting through the warmth of the cabin like cold steel. Isla pressed herself against the wall, clutching the blanket to her chest. Her breath trembled, and in her eyes flickered the old terror. That no matter where she ran, shame would always find her, pounding until the wood splintered. Chaska rose first, his towering figure blotting out the fire's glow as he moved toward the door. He did not hurry, each step slow, deliberate, like a mountain shifting. Tahu followed, silent and coiled, his bare chest gleaming with the sheen of firelight and melted snow. The younger man's hand hovered near the latch, but his eyes never left his father's face. The knock came once more, Elias Turner's voice spitting venom. "She doesn't belong to you. She belongs to the judgment of her own kind. Let her out before we take her out." Martha Kane's words laced through after, bitter and shrill. "She's ruined. She'll curse this place worse if you keep her. Give her back to where she came from, or cast her to the snow." Isla closed her eyes, the blanket pressed against her lips to keep from crying aloud. Every word stung, each syllable branding the lie she had carried for years, that she was nothing but broken flesh. Her heart bled against the weight of voices, yet the fire's warmth touched her cheek, reminding her she was still alive. Chaska unlatched the door. The storm surged in, carrying with it the lantern glow of gathered townsfolk. Snow clung to their coats and hats, their eyes hard, their mouths set in judgment. Elias stood at the front, shoulders squared, his smugness sharpened by the pack behind him. Martha glared from his side, lips pursed in satisfaction. "You think you can hide her here?" Elias sneered, spitting into the snow at the threshold. "She's our shame, not yours. Send her out. This is no place for her." Chaska stood, unmoving, his white hair whipped by the storm, his bare chest steaming against the cold. His voice, when it came, was steady thunder. "She is not yours to shame." The words hung heavy, startling in their simplicity. Elias's jaw tightened, but he did not step forward. He gestured sharply. "She's been touched, spoiled, cast aside. You'd have your son marry such a thing." His voice rose, meant for the crowd. "You'd taint your blood with her filth?" A gasp rippled among the townsfolk. Isla's breath caught, tears burning her eyes. She wanted to sink into the floor, to dissolve into nothing, but then she felt the shift in the room. Chaska's stillness deepening, Tahu's silence sharpening like a blade drawn slow from its sheath. Tahu stepped forward, his towering frame filling the doorway. The storm wrapped around him, snow plastering his dark hair to his face, his body unmoved by the cold. He said nothing, but when Elias lifted a hand as though to strike the air with authority, Tahu's arm shot out, catching his wrist. The crack of bone against his grip silenced the crowd. Elias gasped, his face paling, the false courage draining from him. Tahu did not squeeze, did not lash out. He simply held Elias's wrist until the man's knees softened, and his threat melted into the snow. Then he released him with quiet contempt, the gesture speaking more than any words could. Martha's face twisted. "You see? Savages. That's all they are. And now you, Isla Monroe, you hide among them, thinking yourself safe? You've no place here, not with them, not with us. You'll bring nothing but curses." The words sliced deep, and Isla felt them lodge where scars already lived. Her chest heaved, the blanket slipping from her grip. All eyes shifted toward her, some cruel, some pitying, none forgiving. Her knees threatened to give, but she forced herself upright, fingers trembling as she reached for the edge of the table to steady herself. Her voice was thin, but it carried. "I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask for them to carry me through the snow. But they did. They gave me food, warmth, dignity. More than you ever gave me." The fire cracked behind her, punctuating her words. The crowd muttered, uneasy. Reverend Josiah stepped from behind them, his cloak heavy with snow, his face etched with sorrow. He lifted a hand for silence, his eyes settling on Isla with a weight that made her chest ache. "Child," he said softly, "if you tie yourself to them, there will be no return. The town will cast you out forever. Think carefully. This choice is not light." His words, though kind, pressed down like the storm itself. Isla's throat constricted. She wanted to scream that she had no choice, that she had been cast out long before this night. But then she caught Tahu's gaze, steady and waiting. He had not spoken a word since she met him, yet in his silence she heard the truth. He was offering not pity, not demand, but a place to stand. Her voice trembled, but she forced it into the night. "I have already been cast out. What more can you take?" The Reverend's shoulders sagged, as though her answer carried both strength and sorrow. The townsfolk shifted, uncertain now, murmurs breaking the stillness. Some turned their eyes away, unwilling to meet hers. Elias, nursing his wrist, spat into the snow once more. "Then stay with them. You'll find no welcome here again." He turned sharply, leading the others back into the storm, Martha's laughter cutting through the night like glass shattering. The door slammed shut against the wind, silence falling heavy in their wake. Only the storm outside raged, its howl softened by the thick walls of the cabin. Isla swayed where she stood, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Chaska returned to the fire, lowering himself to the floor, as though the storm had been no more than a passing noise. Tahu remained by the door, his hands still clenched, his body rigid, as though every muscle in him burned from holding back the violence he had refused to unleash. Isla turned her face toward him, her lips parting though no words came. He met her gaze at last, the firelight reflecting in his dark eyes. There was no pity there, no judgment, only a question unspoken, waiting for her answer. And in that silent exchange, Isla realized the trial was not the town's, not even the Reverend's, but her own. Could she lift her head and claim the dignity they had denied her? Could she step beyond shame and let their silence hold her, not as broken, but as whole? Her heart pounded, and for a moment she thought she might speak. But before the words could form, a gust of wind rattled the shutters, and in its hollow cry came a new fear. The storm outside was not finished, and neither was her reckoning. The cabin held its silence long after the voices of the town had vanished into the storm. Isla stood near the fire, her hands trembling though the heat licked her skin. The judgment of the settlement still rang in her ears, their words sinking like stones into water, but something within her shifted. She had spoken back, if only a little. She had stood where once she would have folded. The echo of it lingered, fragile but real. Chaska stirred, his broad frame rising as he fed another log into the fire. The flames surged, throwing shadows high against the walls. He said nothing, only returned to his seat, his presence steady as bedrock. His silence was not neglect but trust, leaving the moment to her. Tahu remained by the door, his shoulders rigid, his gaze locked on the storm beyond. Snow gusted against the shutters, rattling them like bones. He had not moved since the townsfolk left, as if standing guard against something larger than their scorn. Isla's eyes lingered on him. His bare chest gleamed with sweat and frost, his hair still damp, his silence stretched taut. She longed to know what he thought, but his wordless patience unsettled her more than anger would have. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "They'll never forgive me now." Chaska's head lifted, his white hair catching the firelight. "Forgiveness is their chain, not yours." The words fell heavy, sinking into her chest. She wanted to reject them, but the truth glowed like the fire. She had been bound by shame long before tonight. Still, to step beyond it felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown dark. A sudden gust roared, shaking the cabin, forcing a draft that snuffed half the firelight. Darkness leapt into the corners, and the storm howled as though it demanded entry. Isla shivered, pulling the blanket close, but this time the cold was not only from snow. It was the weight of choice pressing upon her, the question that Tahu's silence carried. She turned to him, her lips trembling. "Why don't you speak? Why don't you tell me what you want?" For a moment he did not move. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, the firelight sliding over his frame. His eyes, dark and steady, locked with hers. He did not answer with words, but with a gesture. He knelt before her. The movement was quiet, reverent, his massive frame folding low until he looked up at her, as though her brokenness did not frighten him. He offered his hand, palm open, not demanding, only waiting. Isla's breath caught. Her heart thundered, every scar of shame rising to the surface. She whispered the words that had been her prison for years. "Don't touch me. I'm broken." The storm wailed, but Tahu did not move. He let the silence hold the weight of her confession, his hand still open. His eyes spoke where his lips did not. He would not deny her brokenness, but neither would he turn away. Tears burned her cheeks. She had spent years being touched without respect, claimed without consent, her body treated as proof of her ruin. Yet here in this firelit cabin, a man waited on her choice alone. The power of it unsteadied her more than cruelty ever had. Her fingers trembled as she reached, hovering above his palm. Heat radiated from him, not just from flesh but from the life he offered. She could pull away and remain in the storm of shame. Or she could set her hand there and feel what it meant to be chosen not in spite of her brokenness, but with it. She pressed her hand into his. The contact seared her, not with pain but with recognition. Her sob broke loose, the words spilling again. "I'm broken." Tahu's grip closed gently, firm but careful, as if holding both her fragility and her strength at once. He bowed his head, still silent, his breath steady. In his restraint she found the proof she had needed. He would not take. He would receive. Behind them, Chaska rose. His deep voice carried like a prayer. "Then let it be so." The door opened and snow gusted in, revealing Reverend Josiah standing there, his cloak drenched, his face lined with both doubt and sorrow. He had returned, unseen, perhaps drawn by the storm. His eyes moved from Isla's tear-streaked face to Tahu kneeling before her. For a long moment he said nothing, the weight of decision heavy in the room. Finally he stepped forward, his boots thudding against the floorboards. "The town would have me condemn you," he said softly. "But I cannot. What I see here is not ruin. It is covenant." He lifted a trembling hand, laying it above them. "I bless this union, though it may cost me my place among them. May the snow witness it, may the fire guard it." The cabin held its breath. Isla looked at Tahu, tears blurring her vision, and for the first time her whisper came not as a plea but as a vow. "Don't touch me unless I give you leave." Tahu's voice broke the silence at last, deep and steady, the first words she had heard from him. "Then I will wait forever." Her sob turned into laughter through tears, her heart splitting open with something she had not felt in years. Hope. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his, their breath mingling in the fire's glow. The storm screamed outside, but inside, warmth spread like spring pushing through ice. The Reverend lowered his hand. Chaska's eyes shone, the faintest glimmer of pride beneath the calm. The fire roared back to life as if in witness, light washing the cabin walls with gold. Isla closed her eyes, her voice steady now. Then let it begin. The storm outside reached its peak, snow clawing at the cabin, the wind howling with fury. Yet within, Isla's heart beat steady, her hand bound with tahus, her dignity no longer something to be begged for but something claimed. And as the world raged beyond the walls, she felt, for the first time, that she was no longer broken, only remade. The fire hissed, sparks flying upward, as though heaven itself leaned down to mark the moment. The door rattled once more, not from fists this time but from the storm itself, reminding them that the world outside had not vanished. Isla lifted her gaze toward it, her hands still clasped in tahus. For the first time, she did not fear what waited beyond. The storm would pass. But what had begun in its heart would endure.